Hello everyone and welcome to this week's She's at the Vicarage. Sorry I didn't post anything last week, but I had a viral infection which pretty much floored me, and so there's not much to share with you about last week, but I hope you're having a good week. I hope you managed to get more done than I did. But here are a few little jobs that I tackle. The first job is this backing that I made for a nativity set for my mum years ago, and I still use it, but it's in pretty poor condition. It had all fallen apart last Christmas, so I wanted to put it back together to be able to use it next Christmas as a backdrop for our nativity characters. As you can see, I'm very excitedly using the vise that I installed in my garage makeover. But unfortunately, although I glued those pieces together, I then tried to nail them to secure them, and the glue became unstuck and it no longer nailed. So that was a bit of a false start, and I thought I'd include that in because not everything works perfectly, does it? So it's good to have some errors as well. But here I go, trying to attach them together more successfully using the vise and some nails. I had removed all the old nails out of it and glued bits together. Now this bit of wood that is part of the nativity background just wasn't quite flat. I hadn't got an electric saw when I sawed it. I sawed it manually, each piece manually, and they never fully lined up. There was that little bit of extra bump, so they didn't fit properly within their surround. So this is me just sawing off another little bit, and also again making use of my vice grip, which I absolutely love. And as I said, every time I use it, it reminds me of my dad and the many times that I've used it in the past. In fact, I probably used it last time when I was making this surround for my mum in my dad's workshop in my mum's house. So that's probably when I last used it. So once it was sawed, I glued it into place. But as you can see, I don't not only glue these bits in place, but I also nail them. I am determined that this is going to hold up for a good number of years. I do apologise for some of the camera angles. I am a professional member of the clergy and not a professional photographer, film videographer. So I'm doing my best, but hopefully you can see that I've attached those bits together. There we go. That's the top of the stable as a backdrop for my nativity characters, and then I just nailed the frame at the bottom together, and that job was done. You'll have to see at Christmas what it actually looks like in place. But the next little job that I did, just before actually I went down with the infection, so I was starting to feel a little bit grotty doing this, but I managed to get it done, was actually returning the second shelf to the pantry. You saw in my video the makeover that I did of the pantry, but we do want a second shelf, and the plan actually is to put a cupboard under that first shelf and to put some vegetable storage and bottle storage under this second shelf. But we do have the second shelf, but as you can see from this little inserted picture, the shelf used to rest on the first shelf, and I don't like that. I want it to lie flush, and so first of all I put a frame together next to that first shelf, nailing them in, as you can see what I'm doing. I put the tape there in place so that I knew where I needed to drill and where it needed to go to make sure it remained totally, I can't think what the word is, vertical, after using the spirit level. So I started screwing the screws in, and it was quite simple. First of all, I borrowed my brother-in-law's electric drill, which is plugged into the mains, and it was way too powerful to be screwing in these screws. As you can see, it just jumps out. It's just the power of it was crazy. And so instead I moved on and got my handheld portable electric drill that actually just works off the battery, a rechargeable battery. It worked quite well for some of them, but again you can see it's just a little bit too powerful to twist these screws in and put these screws in place. So what I end up doing in a moment, you'll see, is giving up on using any form of electricity, and instead I just went on to use some muscle power. But that picture that you just saw inserted, which I'll insert again now, it just helps you see more clearly Actually, what I'm doing, I'm putting in a frame. The next little bit that I need to do after using my manual screwdriver, this screwdriver was one of my first DIY tools that I was given, and it's a flowery screwdriver that actually has multiple settings on it, different inserts for it. I think people at the time that I got it weren't that sure of women doing DIY. I think it's probably much more acceptable now. Something that I inherited from my dad, that the love of DIY, but again, not always thought of to be a female trait, but I enjoy doing it in my spare time. So as you can see, this beautiful screwdriver brings a bit of prettiness to the situation, but enables me to really secure these screws in place. And so the next job was putting in that final stand to hold it up. As you can see from this insert, you can see what I'm planning to do. And it was back to my vice grip and cutting the piece of wood in place. This bit of wood actually is left over from the bench that I did last week. So always making use of all that I have, and anything that I really don't need can go. So here I am just sawing through the block. And then once I had cut it to shape, I painted it. I'm afraid I failed to record myself painting it, but I actually kept it in the garage to paint. And while that was happening and that paint was drying, I went back, cleared up, vacuumed up all the bits that I'd created from screwing these pieces of wood into the wall, making sure the place, getting up all the dust that I possibly could get up. And then I cleaned down the walls, just gave them a quick clean down to gather up any dust that the vacuum hadn't managed to pick up. Again, I do apologise, the angles aren't brilliant in this video, but hopefully you can see that I am doing something, putting some newspaper down, because the plan is then to paint. I don't want these pieces of wood being very obvious, and so I paint them to merge them in to the wall, make them stand out slightly less. And we did have some paint left over, so it's good use to try and use up some of that paint and touch up some bits that weren't very good as well while I had the paint pot out. I realised that I didn't want to get paint on the first shelf. And so you'll see in a moment, there we go, realising what I was going to do. I put some newspaper in place just to protect the covering that I've put on that first shelf, but enable me to be able to paint. And it does blend in beautifully once painted green. I did return back and paint it a second coat as well. So while all the paint was drying, I got the board that had used to be the shelf, that second shelf, and I cut it to size. I also then put the second coat on the second leg, so that was ready to be used. I'm afraid I lost the filming of me covering the shelf, but what you'll see is I had the plastic wrap that I'd used on the first shelf that I used again on the second shelf, so the shelves can blend together. And so here is the final second shelf, already being used by the bananas and the bread maker. Fits beautifully into the kitchen and gives us just one more surface, which is really helpful. We'll return to the pantry again when I work on it a little bit more, but next week, after I've recovered from my virus, I tackle this front circle. So join me in the vicarage garden in our next video, which will be coming up shortly. I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care. God bless. Stay well.